Private credit is experiencing its Roach Motel moment.
Blackstone making headlines in the private credit arena.
Because the headline said we were halting redemptions. We're not halting redemptions, just changing the form.
Do people understand what private credit, how this market works? It's not liquid.
The firm says it will fulfill 100% of repurchase requests in its $82 billion BCRED fund.
And we've been very cautious and incremental about our exposure to the headlines, the themes that are dominating headlines today, whether it be software or retail funds.
Retail getting spooked. Retail is really worried. Retail's trying to take out more money than you're allowed to take out.
If you're new here, my name is Alice. I am a CPA. I also own my own wealth management and CFO services firm. Back when I worked in corporate, I worked extensively in the private equity industry, and what I did in work did include private debt as well. In the last 60 days, Blue Owl Capital shut the door on their investor redemptions. Blackstone let investors pull a record $3.8 billion out of their flagship credit fund. The private industry is valued at $3 trillion overall, but they're currently facing a stress test that could potentially start spreading to other sectors and be the start of something more significant. So private credit existed well before 2008, but after the financial crisis, it really grew because this whole banking industry had to tighten their lending requirements after all of those shady mortgage-backed securities that were repackaged into collateralized debt obligations were basically exposed. And back then, those collateralized debt obligations were sold to investors who basically had no idea what they were even investing in. And this whole concept of bad loans to unqualified people is what basically crashed and collapsed the entire American economy in 2008.
Some of the largest investment banks in the world failed. Stock markets plunged. Banks stopped lending to families and small businesses. The economy was shrinking by an annual rate of more than 8%. Our businesses were shedding 800,000 jobs each month.
Because the US government doesn't ever want a repeat of what happened in 2008 ever again, banks had to tighten their lending requirements, which is the right thing for them to do on the supply side. On the demand side, lending requirements from companies haven't changed at all. In fact, 70% of businesses in North America are SMBs, and ever since 2008, the private lending industry has grown to a $2 trillion market. Today, private credit, however people feel about it, in my opinion, is quite vital to our economy because they serve mid-market businesses that cannot be serviced or approved for whatever reason by a big bank or a traditional lender. Let's say a privately held real estate developer needs a $50 million loan to fund a development project over the next 5 to 10 years. This developer could also go to a traditional bank as well, but they may or may not be approved by traditional financing. Now, when a traditional bank underwrites a really big loan, they're not necessarily going to hold the whole thing on their own books. That's just not how the lending industry works conventionally. What they will actually do is they will sell off parts of the loan to smaller borrowers. And this is where private credit can come in. And in the lending world, this is what we call like syndication, basically when there are multiple lenders that come together to fund a deal. There's a second layer that makes things more complicated. Some of these private credit funds, again, that are offering that money on the supply side, well, where are they getting their money from? Well, some of these funds basically have to raise equity from their investors. And as an investor, if you were to invest in debt, the only way that would incentivize you to invest in private debt as opposed to going to the bond market would be that the fund offers you an above average market return. That's basically the whole incentive of investing in private credit versus investing in bonds. And that's exactly what companies like Blue Owl and Blackstone do when they have a private debt fund. They lend money to mid-market SMBs, and the business model for their fund is extremely straightforward, actually. They borrow from investors at one rate, they lend to companies at a higher rate, and they pocket the spread plus the management fees that they charge for the fund. The math on private credit is actually very lucrative because let's go back to the real estate developer example. You know, if they need $50 million and they can't get it from a traditional bank with a lower interest rate, where else are they going to get the money, right? Private credit returns actually yielded about 10.5% annualized. This is as of 2024, which beat high yield bonds and leveraged loans significantly. With these sorts of returns, definitely will command demand. Now, one more layer of complexity that I want to add here. If we look into BlackRock's private credit fund, and we look into the actual public data that they post about the fund, this is actually a leveraged fund as well, which means that, yes, they have equity investors that have contributed a certain amount of capital to the fund, but on top of that, the fund also borrows money to fund the operations of the fund. Private credit can be a little bit convoluted, but basically the fund is lending money to their customers, aka borrowers or mid-market companies that cannot get a loan elsewhere, so they have to borrow at 14% from the fund. The fund then, let's say, passes off 9 or 10% to their investors. That difference between the 14% and the 10% that they give to their investors is their profit. They then pocket a couple of percentage points for themselves, and you can see how this can be extremely lucrative for the fund managers. In the private equity world, $100 million of assets under management in a fund is considered a smaller fund. Some of the bigger funds, the mega funds, have assets under management in the trillions, usually distributed across like a wide range of funds, aka products that they sell to their investors. Now, to understand why private credit is breaking right now, we want to talk about where these funds are really putting their money. And the answer is mostly software. The period from 2020 to 2023 was one of the greatest booms that the SaaS industry has ever seen. Because when COVID hit and when the world went remote overnight, demand for cloud software exploded. And in peak 2021, there were some SaaS revenue multiples that hit 40 times revenue. Now, obviously, when private equity saw this, they went all in. Silicon Valley also went all in. And between 2020 to 2023, PE firms alone deployed over $100 billion just in software deals. Software was like the hottest thing since sliced bread because everyone liked their business model. First of all, there's no inventory, recurring revenue, 80% margins, a lot of stickiness. I'm sure everyone also read Naval Ravikant's book where he talked about how code is going to make the next generation's billionaires, and everyone went all in. Again, software was the hottest thing since sliced bread. Now, even though software was really, really hot, not all companies can raise capital. Well, first of all, not every software company that was founded during that period was a tech unicorn that was able to raise a ton of money. I don't speak for every single software company out there, but a typical structure for a software company is to have one technical co-founder who's like responsible for product and another co-founder that's basically responsible for everything else: sales, marketing, finance, operations. And then that's already a 50-50 equity split. And then the founders get diluted even more with stock-based comp if they have to pay for more software engineers. If they raise money, then they dilute even more with investors. So not all of them want to raise a ton of money right off the bat, to be honest. And once a company has proven profitable business model that's generating positive cash flow, there's absolutely nothing wrong with considering debt. So that's why software companies have to go to lenders. However, a lot of them also don't have enough assets as collateral to put up against a loan. And not all of them have pre-committed revenue from long-term contracts. They also might not have been existed long enough in business to have a real track record for lending, because most of these software companies are startups. Pre-committed revenue is a huge point of stickiness in software, and it materially also impacts cash flow, valuation, and basically changes almost the whole business overall when you have companies on long-term contracts as opposed to point of sale revenue. With the rise in software, they basically became the single largest sector in private credit, and more than 1,900 software companies were acquired by private equity in this period in deals that are worth over $400 billion. When the Fed started to raise rates in 2022 to combat COVID inflation, SaaS valuations actually went down, and there were fewer IPO exits because of a higher interest rate environment. By the end of 2024, over a third of PE-backed companies had been held by PE for at least 5 years. And a lot of those software companies that were loaded with debt, if we're doing the math, they now need to refinance. Counting back the years here, most private credit loans that were written from 2020 to 2022 are coming due right now, right? 2026, 27, and 28. And so this is where the refinancing credit meets the AI disruption world that we're currently in right now. And when we combine the two, they are basically destroying a lot of the assumptions that private credit for these software companies were built on. So ChatGPT was released in November 2022, and fast forward 3 or so years later, the largest tech companies have overall spent trillions of dollars on AI capex expenditures because now it's a race for them to build the best model. And recently, Anthropic released all of these new AI agent plugins that the CEO is now saying could basically automate and wipe out a huge portion of white-collar jobs and workflows. And because of that, there's been a software crash, and that started this whole SaaS apocalypse thing that we're in now. So this is where the domino effect starts to kick in. What about all these loans that the SaaS companies took out? Every assumption that made these SaaS companies attractive for private lenders to lend to in the first place, including sticky customers, recurring revenue, high switching costs, they're now being stress tested by new technology, specifically AI, specifically Claude, to the point where I personally don't even know if it really makes sense to start a traditional SaaS or software company today, just because who knows whether Claude can come up with something new in 2 months and basically wipe out your entire business. A lot of these software companies are going to have to pivot and incorporate AI in some way so that they still stay relevant and they're not vibe coded out of business. Now, even before the SaaS crash earlier this year, there were already some warning signs that loan quality in private credit was deteriorating.
Billions of dollars in loans to first brands have effectively vanished, revealing off-balance sheet borrowing and double-counted invoices. Jefferies, UBS, and BlackRock are among those with exposure. In his words, I probably shouldn't say this, but when you see one cockroach, there are probably more.
So back in September of last year, there was a company called Tricolor Holdings, which was a subprime auto lender that basically sold used cars to riskier borrowers, and they funded the whole operation with debt themselves. That company is now filed for bankruptcy, by the way, and JP Morgan was actually one of the companies that Tricolor was borrowing from. Then a couple weeks later, another company called First Brands Group, which is another company in the auto industry, this one is aftermarket auto parts. They had a very, very aggressive growth by acquisition strategy that was completely paid for by debt. They also had to file for bankruptcy as well, and they had a bunch of issues that came to light. Now, maybe they were more isolated events, bad loans, bad players, but that skepticism kind of bled over into this SaaS crash. And basically that was a start of cracks starting to form in the private credit industry. Now, the next thing that happened in the sequent events was with Blue Owl Capital. And what happened with Blue Owl basically set off a chain reaction that's still currently unfolding. Now, when the SaaS sell-off hit, investors started to panic. And what they did is they put in redemption requests. And specifically, it was their tech-focused fund. And these redemption requests ended up surging to 15% of the fund's total NAV. Blue Owl also has a private fund called OBDCII, which is not part of their publicly traded entity. But for that fund, redemption requests ended up blowing past their standard cap of 5% quarterly. On February 18th, something bad happened, and Blue Owl had to say that we are not letting people redeem from OBDCII. And they actually had to sell off $1.4 billion of their own loans from other funds just to generate liquidity so that they could meet these redemption requests. Now, Blue Owl came out and said that this isn't a big deal because those $1.4 billion of loans were sold at almost par.
And we sold them at par. Fair value, 99.7.
You did sell some of them to a wholly owned subsidiary.
One of the four might be part of our insurance business. How is it reasonable that that would undermine the other 75% of the sales?
But the market basically didn't interpret this well at all. And Blue Owl stock went into this huge sell-off streak, and they fell over 15% from their prior highs in just a couple of days. I guess you can say that financial lending is a very sensitive industry because there are parallels here also to 2008. So the domino effects spread extremely quickly. The next fund that it hit was Blackstone, which is one of the biggest names in private credit, and the whole market noticed this. So on March 3rd, Blackstone disclosed that their investors had requested to redeem a record of 7.9% of shares from their flagship private credit fund. It's worth $82 billion. So that's roughly $3.8 billion in withdrawal requests, which exceeds the typical 5% quarterly cap. And it was actually reported that they had their senior executives inject their own money in their capital to cover the gap, but they were still able to meet 100% of requests. Very similar to Blue Owl, they have a lot of exposure to software, and software actually sits at about 25% of their whole portfolio. And then their stock dropped on this news. And then more domino effect because this basically started to impact some other asset managers in the industry. In this industry, when bad things happen, it spreads very, very fast. Financial industry is extremely sensitive to this sort of stuff, and the effects are very, very contagious across the industry, whether some of these other funds even had bad loans themselves. So the question that a lot of people have when it comes to this private credit collapse is this going to be the start of something more significant, start bleeding into other industries, and basically be the start of 2008? Private credit goes through cycles, but there are some parallels right now with what we're seeing here today and also what we saw back in 2008. The first is valuation concerns on these loans. Private investments are valued very differently than public investments because they are private and the market for them is not accessible. So valuing a private credit loan is very different from a publicly traded bond where technically anyone could be able to look up what the value is of that publicly traded bond. In 2008, those CDOs that were sold off were valued at pretty much what the parties that were selling them off at had priced them at. And a lot of them were said to be AAA loans, only to be marked as junk a couple of years later. Now, when it comes to valuation today, it's still the case that lenders do run their own financial models, but they also use third-party valuation companies, so they're not just being extremely biased with their own assumptions. Then there's the liquidity concern. In 2008, banks funded these long-term mortgages with short-term money. Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, two famous names that came out of the 2008 crisis, they were holding billions of dollars in extremely long-term mortgage securities, but financing them with very short-term positions and short-term borrowing. Private credit investing is extremely liquid because the money that these investors have given into the fund are essentially being lent out to the software companies. All the fund can do is promise back to their investors through distributions as what they collect as repayments from the software companies themselves. When investors want to put money into a fund, especially a privately held one, there are all of these contractual rules that they have to enter into, including how long their capital is going to be locked up for, and any capital call rules and redemption rate rules that the fund sets. So there's generally very low liquidity here. There are also a lot of layers and complexity today too in private credit. These funds, like I mentioned earlier, are extremely leveraged themselves in that they have lines of credit with their own lenders to fund the fund's operations. And in aggregate, banks have extended roughly $95 billion in credit lines to private vehicles as of 2024. It's reported directly by the Federal Reserve. Now, if dozens of private credit funds simultaneously start drawing down on their bank credit lines to meet redemptions, it could start creating a liquidity vacuum that hits the traditional banking system. Now, the whole purpose of the private credit industry is that it's supposed to be self-regulated, meaning that the Federal Reserve cannot force a private credit fund to hold more capital or to improve their underwriting standards. And not having that regulation is what's allowed for a lot of mid-market economic growth. Not to mention that these mega funds have a lot of money and therefore a lot of political lobbying power as well. Private credit is still relatively small compared to mortgage lending in 2008 that impacted a very large proportion of Americans. Other than that single blue owl fund, most of these investments are still pretty gatekept. And they do that not because they're trying to be like mean or judgmental to investors that don't have enough money, but it's simply because they themselves as a business, they don't want to take on that risk of allowing investors that are not qualified to invest in private investments into their fund. Because if they start letting everyone in without vetting them for risk tolerance, investing sophistication, people who cannot accept the liquidity restraints, that probably isn't really good fund corporate governance overall. Because if something bad happens, and something bad has clearly happened to the SaaS business model with the disruption of AI, which is now domino affecting into private credit, which impacts their business and also other qualified investors that chose to go with them as well.